Welcome to the VisX Barefoot Podcast. That's right, I am Barefoot, and I am your host, Vis or Travis or Malcolm, whichever you prefer. But for studio purposes, let's just go with Vis. It's easy. So what is the Barefoot Podcast? Why am I doing it now? What will we be talking about? This is episode 1. Do it afraid. Why? Because this is terrifying. Sitting by yourself, staring into the bright green light of a camera with a microphone on, and listening to yourself think, speak, comment, and all the things that go with that. This is learning a new thing. This is learning how to interact with a recording studio. This is learning how to create a flow to a conversation that I'm having just with you, even though you're not here. An interview structure, I think, would be easier, and I hope to do some of those. But for now, it's just me and the microphone and the video camera. So let's get into it today. I'm starting today. This is being recorded January 15th, and we have upcoming inauguration in 5 days, also on Martin Luther King Day. And so I thought it's probably best to get something out before that. I'm not really ready to do it, but I am ready to go ahead and dive in. One of my favorite quotes is from General George S. Patton, and it says, a good plan violently executed today is better than a perfect plan executed next week. So that's what we're doing. This isn't going to be perfect. The lighting isn't going to be perfect. The sound won't be perfect. There may be background noise. I may clear my throat and not be able to properly edit it out. I may stumble over my words. I may get lost in my notes. But today, we're going to do it anyway. I had a conversation with a 5-year-old about 3 days ago. They were telling me that at school, they had a friend that called them a coward. And I asked this 5-year-old, do you know what a coward is? And of course they didn't, and so I explained that a coward is someone who's afraid of things and doesn't do them because they're afraid, which is the opposite of bravery or courage, which is to be afraid of something and to do it anyway, to do it afraid, which is a quote I first heard from a good friend of mine, Aaron Quinones, also known as Sergeant Q, if you're looking for him on various social media platforms. He's an entrepreneur. I know him mostly as a missionary, and he's an incredible man, an incredible speaker, business coach, and mentor, and a really good friend. And I listened to him talk to a group of men about building relationships and becoming transparent and open and honest. And he said, let's be honest, as men, a lot of times we're just afraid to open up to other people. We're afraid to do that thing that we know we should be doing. And so oftentimes we don't do it. Well, here's the news flash. Do it afraid. That's how we accomplish the things that we want to accomplish in life. We do it afraid. And I'll be honest, if it doesn't scare you at least a little bit, how valuable is it really? So today, episode 1 of the VisX show, a Barefoot podcast with a Gen X tilt, I'm going to do it afraid. And maybe episode 2 will be a little bit less afraid and will be a little bit better put together. And maybe will be a little bit more interesting. I don't know. But I assume this will be my worst show. So, what exactly is a Barefoot podcast and why? Well, You'll find out over a number of episodes as you get to know me a little bit better. But I am what you might consider a nonconformist. For if you know me and you're watching this, you're laughing a little bit because there are not very many truer things that you could say about me. However, that nonconformity is most obvious by the fact that I love being barefoot. I don't just love it. I am often barefoot, and when I'm not barefoot, I'm usually wearing sandals that are just a flat piece of rubber with a little bit of strapping on it. And so I'm known far and wide by my children's friends, by their teachers and administrators, by my friends, for being the guy that usually is not wearing shoes. And so that's an obvious way that is less conformative to social norms. But being barefoot isn't really the genesis of me being different. I've always been different. And so I hope as you get to know me and as we talk about some of the things that happen in life and happen in the world around us, culture, art maybe, technology, then some of these things will become more obvious rather than me just telling you stories about my life and nonconformity. I'd rather just approach the show as an opportunity to talk about things that are going on, and when I give my perspective, you'll begin to understand why my perspective has a background of not doing the normal things. So I'll give you the first bit of barefoot news. So I am, of course, barefoot today. I do intend on doing all of these shows barefoot. I suppose there may be an instance where I don't. But the first time I have recorded me being barefoot in a very nonconformist way was in 1998. I actually wrote a poem called Barefoot in the Badlands. And I was doing something else, maybe a bit nonconformist. I had taken a semester off from school and drove my pickup truck around the western half of the U.S. At some point in that trip, I ended up camping in the Badlands National Park in, I believe it's in South Dakota. I was out hiking in my sandals, and one of my sandals broke. And so I just decided to ditch the sandals. I took them off and carried them the rest of the day and just hiked through the Badlands National Park barefoot. And it was incredible. It was incredible to feel the texture of the earth, incredible to take better care for where you're stepping so you're not stepping on something maybe you shouldn't be, sharp or poisonous, as it were. But it was an incredible experience, and it touched me so much, and I loved it so much that I was moved at that time to write a poem about it, entitle it Barefoot in the Badlands. And so that's just a little bit about being barefoot. You'll find out more. I certainly am into things like barefoot running, barefoot shoes, and all those other things. But that's just a fun way for me to title the show. It's an image, almost just representative of the other things in my life, except that it also is true. You'll find out more about those things in my life as we get to know each other and as time goes on. But today, we're doing it afraid, and we're going to jump in on politics. Just a little bit of a hot take, because this is a show that's supposed to give you a flavor for the Generation X attitude, outlook, because of the ways that we were raised. It may be different than the way you were raised, or maybe you're from my generation and you can say, gosh, yes. So, politics today. My first hot take, I'll be honest, I've said this over and over again over the years. Generation X has absolutely dropped the ball on national politics in the United States. What do I mean by that? Well, When is the last time you saw a Gen X president? That's right. While some people try and stretch things a little bit and say that Barack Obama was a Generation X president, it's just not the case. He was born in, I believe, 1961, and the most accepted cutoff between the baby boomers and Generation X is actually 1964. And so, we have never had a Generation X president. We may never have a Generation X president. Why do I think that? Well, first off, we are about to have Donald J. Trump inaugurated as our president with a millennial vice president, J.D. Vance. And there's a really good chance if Trump and Vance have an administration that does a really good job, then and the American people are better off in 4 years from today than they are today, there's a really good chance that J.D. Vance would be the first millennial president. And he could even have an 8-year run. So what does that look like afterwards for the possibility of a Generation X president? Well, I'll tell you, some of the statistics tell us that the average age of a president at inauguration is 55. Of course, Joe Biden and Donald Trump skew that curve, especially recently. But even still, that's about the average age. Now, the oldest Generation X people alive are around age 60. So we're really just sort of coming into the era where we should expect to see more Generation X politicians seeking the top office. But currently, if you look at the statistical makeup of Congress, 48% of Congress are baby boomers, followed by 36% being Generation X. The balance being millennials, there's still some from the silent generation, and I guess Generation Z, the Zoomers, might already be making their mark. So barely a third of Congress is Generation X, which means half are baby boomers. And when I say Generation X has dropped the ball, I'm talking about the fact that we have continued to allow the baby boomers to run everything. There is no reason why Generation X shouldn't step up. And you might argue, well, they just won't step down from their positions. I'll tell you, I fully believe that if Generation X wanted those positions, they could easily oust those people who are old, doddering fools. Absolutely furious. Even right here in my hometown, we have a congressperson who has just been outed as having been living in an assisted living facility for the past 6 months, a memory care facility, because she's not competent to do her job or to live on her own. That's right. And we allow this to happen. We have Generation X is essentially age 42 to 60 right now. So we should be absolutely running every aspect of the world, with the exception of some of the exceptional millennials that are already stepping up to do the job. And yet, we have abdicated that responsibility to an entire generation who is happy to hold on to power way past their usefulness, their cognitive ability, and any reasonableness. Why have we allowed it? Well, I have some ideas, and I think that it mostly comes back to the fact that we were latchkey kids. Even though I wasn't specifically a latchkey kid, the idea of a generation of children whose parents were largely hands-off, a generation of children who took themselves to school and back home and made their own snacks. We made lunches, we made dinners while mom and dad were out working. This is an idea that should show you that you have an entire generation that's fairly used to being left alone. So why would we be different now? We still want to be left alone. If you look at a book called The Fourth Turning, I forget the author, but it's an incredible book that back in the 90s basically predicted a lot of the turmoil and upheaval that you might find today in the world based on generational cycles. And in that book, it makes it very clear that Generation X is what they consider a nomadic generation. Maybe you would say we're lost. We certainly don't have the connection to a unified government. We don't have as much of a connection of any real point to rally around. We wander, we want to be left alone. So we have a generation of people who have these feelings, these ideas, these desires, if you will, to basically just be left alone. And those are not ideas that promote or inspire an individual to step out into public office. Public office is hard. Yes, even if you're corrupt, it's hard. It's not easy. It may have its benefits. It may have the opportunity to build wealth. It may have many things, and of course the draw to power. But again, the statistics are showing if only 36% of Congress is from Generation X, I cannot believe that that number is really going to go up appreciably. The baby boomers, who are half of Congress now, they have been in there since they were much younger, many of them, than the youngest Generation Xer right now. And so they were already doing it. They were already involved. They wanted to be involved in government. Generation X, we don't. And I use the term we loosely. Of course, 36% of Congress is Generation X. A lot of your local governments probably have Gen Xers in it. But for today, we have never had a Gen X president. And my argument to you is that we probably won't. I don't see anything that's going to change. Who would be the person that would come in their 70s to be a Generation X president after potentially J.D. Vance, right? So if we're 12 years down the road, you've got Generation X is going to be age 72 to 56. Once we've had some millennials that are capable taking office, we as a nation, as a culture, I believe, are going to be hard pressed to go back to a 75-year-old president. It just doesn't make any sense. Why would we do that? I have hesitations about the age of Donald Trump. Of course, we're just finishing 4 years under Joe Biden, which has been the biggest scam in presidential history. Everybody knows he's not competent. Most people have known it for 4 entire years. And so here we are. Generation X let it happen. You're welcome. So that's going to wrap it up for today. Gen X, I love you. I am you. But we can do better. We can find the millennials that we want to take over, because I know you and you're not going to get out there and do it. That's okay. That's okay. But we can help the millennials, we can help the Zoomers take over, and we can help push the baby boomers into retirement where they belong. Thank you very much for joining me today, for checking out this show. I hope that you'll come back. I believe this will be the hardest show that I've done. I believe it will be the one with the most flaws. It will be the hardest to watch, to listen to follow in terms of flow, in terms of content, in terms of technology. I'd love it if you would share this around to your friends. If you watch to the end, I really would appreciate you to like and subscribe wherever it is that you listen to podcasts. And I appreciate your time and attention, and we'll see you next time.